It Ain't Over Till It's Over: Reclaiming Representation of the Older Female Body by Phyllis Martinez. You might think that these sexy images, like these advertising beauties, are a modern development, and to a certain extent this is true. But the idea of what constitutes beauty and which women are worthy of being shown goes back hundreds and hundreds of years in Western art. Images of women have centered on their utility as sexual entertainment and reproductive partners for men. However, contemporary older female artists are overturning centuries of practice regarding the purpose of representing the nude female body. Western art is full of scenes like this, of men comparing and judging, measuring, and sculpting to create a female body suitable for the male gaze. No surprise, their dream girl is white, normatively attractive, able-bodied, and of course, young. This means that some women are objectified, at least while they're young. It also means there's been little need to show non-conforming bodies, especially older ones. There are a few images of older women from historical painting. Whereas men are abundantly represented and older men are frequently depicted as wise, pious, and thoughtful, old women are largely invisible. When women past the age of childbearing have been represented, it's often in the role of a maid to offset the beauty of younger central characters. For example, here's a maid holding the bag while Judith cuts off Holofernes' head, or holding the mirror during her mistress's toilette. In Sofonisba Anguissola's self-portrait, her maid is almost transparent, hovering like a ghost in such an unrealistic space that it's hard to consider her a real person. Aside from commissioned portraits of powerful women, few older women appear unless they're related to the artist. The young Velázquez painted this elderly relative more than once. And Rembrandt often portrayed his mother in images like this one. She's dressed in heavy, dark clothing. Her eyes are downcast and her lips are pressed tightly together. James McNeill Whistler's mother famously sat for arrangement in gray and black No. 1, better known as Whistler's mother. She also has a somber expression and is dressed like a widow. She's utterly motionless. The picture on the wall behind her shows a ruined temple, and the curtain has literally been pulled closed on her life. Beauty was a catch-22 for women in art. If you don't have it, you can't be pictured, but if you do, then you're vain. So Vanitas portraits were done primarily to remind women not to get full of themselves because death was on the way. For older women who persisted in using conventions of beauty, Vanitas portraits are so mean-spirited that it's the artistic equivalent of being put on the pillory for ridicule. In 1513, Quentin Matsys painted The Ugly Duchess, or Grotesque Woman, a picture so nice he named it twice. It looks like a modern caricature. This outfit would have been 100 years out of style when the picture was painted. It's clearly intended to draw snickers. Bernardo Strozzi shows pity for the old woman at the mirror, but the image is also mocking. It contrasts the plump peaches and cream maids with their phony grins to the bony, wizened old lady. Her expression is the very portrait of despair. These punitive tropes persist today, even in work by women. Cindy Sherman's photography examines the performance of identity. She skewers older women who enjoy dressing their bodies. They're virtually an old age drag. Like Matsys and Strozzi, Sherman shames women for attempting conventions of beauty to which they're no longer entitled. A woman without youthful beauty is seen as having lost personal identity. Instead, she becomes symbolic of despair, insanity, evil, and death. In 1820, Theodore Géricault painted a woman so crazed by jealousy that she'd been committed. This picture is called The Hyena of Salpêtrière Asylum. In the same decade, Francisco Goya filled a notebook with drawings of old women and witches. Goya's old ladies can be pathetic, primping at the mirror to no avail, but they are dangerous too, carrying men away to the grave and eating babies. There's more than one image like this one. In 1894, Auguste Rodin and his colleague Jules Desbois used the same elderly model to create these sculptures. Desbois called his sculpture Misery, and Rodin titled his after a poem, she who was the helmet maker's once beautiful wife. As a widow no longer young, she's obviously a nobody now. Her head is tilted so far down that you can't see her face. Her breasts are actually concave. Rodin's protégé Camille Claudel, who could have used the Me Too movement, did this sculpture called The Age of Maturity, or L'Âge Mûr. It shows an older woman dragging a man away from a younger beauty. It arose from Rodin's betrayal of Claudel, but it's typical in that it represents death as an old woman. When not an old woman, death was typically represented as a skeleton. So older women in classical art are shown as sad, mad, or bad. Let's take a look at some contemporary artists who have shown older women's bodies in a different way. Among the trailblazers was Alice Neel. She was a portraitist who worked without recognition during the 1950s and 60s when male-dominated abstract expressionism reigned supreme. Her work came to light in the 70s with the growth of the feminist movement. Many of her paintings were shocking to the public, including her paintings of naked pregnant women. But most outrage was generated by this self-portrait at age 82. She shows herself without pretense. You can see the toll years of hard work and childbearing have taken on her, but most amazing is that she has a gaze of her own. She is aware that the viewer is looking at her and judging her, but she's judging the viewer too. This is Bailey Dugan. Dugan got her start in advertising art in New York in the 1960s. She struggled as a figurative artist to show women's bodies out of the context of the sexualizing male gaze. Mea Culpa, My Body, is one of her central works. It's a play on the words mea culpa, I'm guilty. The subject of this large painting obviously rejects being guilty and owns her own body. Dugan says, our bodies are diaries of our experiences. What happens to us is recorded there. Wrinkles, scars, the way we stand. That specificity fascinates me. I think it's beautiful. Queer artist Clarity Haynes also finds beauty in the bodies of older women and breast cancer survivors. This painting, Robin, is typical of her work. Her paintings are huge, much, much larger than life size, and they take years to complete. She's reverential in capturing the details of women's lives expressed in their bodies, their merged fragility and strength. Many older female artists are showing themselves at home in their own skins. Here's Dugan again. Her most recent work shows her just fooling around with her face. You can almost hear her saying, hey guys, look at this. And Kiki Smith created this papier-mâché bust with a deflated bust, a busted bust. You can laugh, it's supposed to be funny. When photographer Martha Wilson was 25, she was terrified of being quote-unquote past 30. Wilson's recent work is called I Have Become My Own Worst Fear. Her work documents the challenges of aging, invisibility, self-doubt, transitions, but Wilson also plainly sees the humor in her situation. This is a completely different kind of joke from Cindy Sherman's gotcha photos of old ladies with bad wigs. There's no shaming here, just older women living their lives in their aging bodies. Aaliyah Chapin created a series of larger-than-life-size paintings that she calls her aunties. Contrast this painting to Rodin's sculpture. These old women are not alone. They're playful, they're laughing, they're outside in nature. Growing old is natural and not necessarily a calamity. Cynthia Hellier-Heinz's drawings also center older women in nature. Her work is mystical and emphasizes the tranquility and wisdom gained over a lifetime. So you may have noticed, as I did, that the majority of women artists representing the older female nude are white. This reflects gaps in intersectionality that have afflicted the feminist movement from its inception. Racist idealization of white female beauty is burdensome to women of color and denies their beauty, as Alison Saar notes in this piece called Weight. So some figurative artists of color assert their beauty through representation primarily of younger people, for example in Amy Sherrill's Unspoken Magic. Many female artists of color don't address aging as an issue and instead focus on racism, attacks on civil rights, and escalating violence. Some, like Faith Ringgold, celebrate older women as icons. In this painting called Sunflower Quilting Bee at Arles, Ringgold shows African American women heroes who fought for Black and female freedom. Quilting connects textile traditions from Africa and the American South, and Arles was the home of Van Gogh and Gauguin. So this setting says that these women are worthy of artistic representation. Van Gogh is even bringing them flowers. Similarly, Joyce Scott, a MacArthur genius, pulls together quilting and beading in Araminta, her tribute to Harriet Tubman. Betty Saar hijacked racist tropes by arming Aunt Jemima. With a gun, Jemima's smile no longer speaks of happy submission. It gleefully anticipates justice. Latina artists have also powerfully repurposed iconography. In 1978, Yolanda Lopez painted her grandmother Victoria Franco as Guadalupe, claiming her as a person to be revered. And Esther Hernandez of Las Mujeres Muralistas makes a similar statement in La Virgen de las Calles. Both of these images show older women that are fully realized individuals, deserving respect. Painter and photographer Mickalene Thomas celebrates her mother's loveliness and style, and Sandra, she's a beauty. Sandra had been a model back when black models were considered a niche market, and suffered from sickle cell anemia throughout her life. So Thomas made her mother her muse in a series called Mama Bush. This photo, echoing paintings by Titian and Ingres, celebrates her mother's beauty and resists what feminist artist and writer Joanna Freud has called the erotic disenfranchisement of postmenopausal women. This sensual image asserts an older woman's right to enjoy being alive in her body in every sense. Joan Semmel has for decades painted her own body literally from her point of view in situations ranging from having sex to changing clothes in the locker room at the gym. The viewer sees what she sees, and she clearly still sees herself as erotically enfranchised. Betty Davis has said, "Old age ain't no place for sissies," and she was right. It's a time of difficult, dramatic changes. But women's lives don't end with their last menstrual cycle. Being older can mean escaping the so-called heterosexual plot that requires women to be sexually compliant, childbearing, or engaged in domestic service. Feminist scholar Kathleen Woodward argues that age as a category becomes equal to gender, and contemporary older female artists are showing that it's a new reality that should be explored through art. Showing older women as fully human and even beautiful is a radical act.